Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. I am super excited to be here today because in today's video I will be talking about the new episode that came out on Netflix called Never Have I Ever by Mindy Kaling, who is someone that I respect so much. I love her, and yeah, I'm excited to give my honest review about the TV show. Now, before we get into it, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out a lot. And then after the video, or maybe even during the video, go ahead and put your comments down below on your thoughts, how it made you feel. But yeah, go ahead and comment below as well as subscribe. Awesome, so I have my notes here because I wanted to make sure that I am actually talking in sequence and making sense. So the first thing I want to talk about is how proud I am that Mindy Kaling was able to get a show on Netflix about an Indian American girl. I mean, that's a huge win for Americans. I wouldn't even just say South Asians, but if you are an American, this is a time to be proud because you have people that are not just a certain way being portrayed on, a public platform like Netflix. So what I wanted to get into is Mindy Kaling's intention with this TV show. So Mindy Kaling obviously wanted this TV show to mirror her own childhood and her own experience growing up in the States, being Indian American, Tamil American. And I think that was really brave of her because a lot of times, you make a story or you put out, a script for the world to see, and it comes from an imagination, and that's super creative and that makes a lot of sense. But to actually write about your own story and have that sense of vulnerability on a public platform for people to judge, for people to comment, for people to love, I think is a huge step of bravery. And again, what a huge win to get it on a platform where so many millions of people watch it every single day. Another thing I really liked about the TV show, and again, we're not getting into the actual TV show yet, but I will, is her casting method. So this was an open cast call for everyone, I believe, if you were in the States and Canada, and she wasn't going after, modeling agencies or acting agencies to cast her talent. She literally gave everyone a fair shot at auditioning. So the audition process was super simple. You were given the script and you just had to record yourself. Of course, there were some, things that you needed to add, like your age and, I think like your name and little things like that. But in terms of the actual auditioning process, it was super simple. And I thought that it really paved way for people to get access to being in a TV show, especially for South Asians. A lot of us don't have, insights, or we don't have connections and we don't know where to start. So the fact that, we were able to be given this, opportunity to perhaps be in a TV show. Again, a lot of us aren't in the field of arts and entertainment. I really think it was a very inclusive way to cast talent, and I really think that a lot more people should consider doing that for when they cast. Of course, I'm not, pushing aside the people that have actually gone to acting school. I'm just saying, especially for minority communities such as South Asian communities, it's very unlikely that we would go in the acting world or industry, not because we don't want to, but because it's not talked about. There's really no gateway into that. So definitely loved that. It's not meant to represent every Indian's, experience growing up in America. And I think that's something that was said, but it also wasn't. But at least for me, I kept reminding myself, and you'll see, because I'll get into my actual feedback and review, but it wasn't meant to be a representation of how every Indian American has grown up in the States, because Indians in general are very diverse, let alone Indian Americans and the whole myriad of, personalities and situations that come out with that. So I definitely took it with a grain of salt that this might be something I can relate to a certain extent, and I can't relate to a certain extent. So yeah, this was her story and this was how she wanted to tell her story, and I definitely respect that, and I think everyone else should too. All right, so getting into the actual, constructive criticism of the show itself. So I do have my notes here, so I'm not off track. The first thing I noticed about the TV show, which did feel a little uncomfortable for me at least, was when the narrator mispronounced Devi's name. Now, Devi herself, I think in the TV show, calls herself Devi, but I think her friends and other characters say Devi or Davy with a D instead of a Devi. So when the narrator said that, it kind of confused me, because I was like, okay, if this show is going to have a narrator that's obviously not South Asian, shouldn't he at least be told to pronounce a name right? But again, I wasn't sure if there was a reason for that. So I will say that was the first thing I noticed, though, was the mispronunciation of her name. What I liked about the TV show was it was supposed to be lighthearted, and all of that was, you know, fun. It wasn't supposed to be like a deep TV show. But I will say, with that being said, the accents, the Indian accents really threw me off, because I wasn't sure if, because it was supposed to be a lighthearted TV show, they didn't want like a real Indian accent or what it was. But yet the Indian accents really threw me off. I wish that they maybe either casted people who could do a better Indian accent, or maybe have them take lessons on doing them. So that was really, again, just the little things. I think it, even though it was a little thing, I think it still contributed to the quality of the show, because it was a little less believable because of the, in my opinion, the poor Indian accent. I think with the show, when I watched it, it was a little hard for me to watch, because again, this was not an Indian American story that I could relate to. I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood as well. I also will say that some of the things that I could relate to, for example, the books falling on the ground, and the mom reacting, I could definitely relate to that. I just think that the way that the scene was narrated and directed was unrelatable, if that makes sense. So the whole concept of respecting, you know, books, and that knowledge is, you know, something to be respected and worshipped, I definitely understood that part. But the scenes were so exaggerated, it was almost as if they were making fun of the way that Indians, or Hindu Indians rather, like respect books. I don't know, it was, there were some scenes where I understood where, you know, where it was coming from. It was meant to poke fun, or I guess like we were supposed to laugh together, but it almost felt as if they were poking fun at it, and it didn't come off tasteful. I think tasteful is the good word. There were a lot of moments in the TV show where the stereotypes that were hit, or the truths or misconceptions that were hit, were almost hit in a very non-tasteful way. And that might be just because maybe my humor and the show's humor might just not match, because that's also something that I can definitely understand. And I just want to take a brief pause, you know, through my whole review, and just say that the reason I wanted to make this video is because I want to be very vocal about the fact that just because, you know, someone who's Indian, or someone who's South Asian, or someone who's brown comes out with, you know, any sort of content, whether that's music, whether that's, you know, a spokesperson, whether that's an actor, doesn't mean that other brown people have to support it. You know, it is definitely one of those hard situations, for me at least, where I think that the show came from such a great intentional place, and there were so many hopes and dreams for the show that I think it did accomplish to a certain extent, or maybe to a certain audience. However, for me, I thought that the show was mediocre in the sense of, you know, the acting I thought was a little subpar, but I will say I actually will give that a slide, considering it was an open cast call, and a lot of these people had backgrounds, I think, in acting, but I don't think they had backgrounds in actual film. So film and theater acting is very different. So I will give leeway with that. But I think, again, the biggest thing was the narration and the direction of the TV show, where there were just moments where I felt like attacked. I felt like, you know, we weren't being laughed with, we were being laughed at. But I will say, so it's so important for me to understand while watching this TV show that Indian Americans everywhere in America are so diverse, like identity-wise, ethnically-wise. I mean, even where we're from in India, it's so different. So for maybe someone like me who was raised and grew up in the way that I did, some of that might be offensive to me, but it might not be offensive to another Indian American who maybe grew up in a different background. I think if the scenes with the stereotypes, whether it was about the Ganesh Puja, whether it was about the book, you know, getting thrown on the ground, whether it was about getting smacked, I wish if they were done in a more tasteful way, or in a more, it might not even be the scene, because I feel like even the characters in the TV show were very like modernized, or they came off very Americanized. So it almost felt very conflicting, or like awkward, when they would randomly go become super Indian. Like it was like, yeah, but I mean, even with that being said, one could argue like, oh, but a lot of Indian Americans have to deal with, you know, code switching and flipping back and forth. So I can totally understand both sides. But for me, there were just some scenes that were like, uncomfortable to watch. And yeah, but again, I feel like depending on the audience, depending on, you know, who you are as an Indian American, those scenes could come off super funny, they could come off super not funny, or they could come off super like maybe confusing, maybe you don't understand them. One of the things that I think the show had a lot of pressure to do, or maybe the show felt like it had to do, was juggle all of these difficult themes and put them in one TV show. Like there were just so many themes that I feel were almost too heavy for a sitcom or too heavy for a comedy show. And especially because every episode was only 24 minutes long, trying to pack all of that in while being humorous, I feel like wasn't delivered in the way that maybe it wanted to be delivered. So that to me was a huge miss. I feel like if anything, the show has sparked so much dialogue, and it really has us thinking and, you know, just acknowledging like so many Indian Americans, like we're so different, you know, and I think that that is such a huge privilege that we're able to, you know, talk about different things and we're able to relate with different situations and different crowds. And I think that's what makes our, you know, community very complex and very exciting. We really have so many ways that we can go with that. So with that being said, I think that, you know, if you watched the show and you felt what this show was wanting to do, like the intention of the show was to make people feel represented, was to share a story, was to make Indian people feel included and recognized. If that is what you felt while watching the show, then mission accomplished. I am so happy for you. And I think that that is a huge win for Mindy Kaling, is to have other Indian Americans that watch the show and feel proud and empowered. Now, if you didn't feel that way watching the show, if you felt a little off, if you felt like this wasn't like up to par with whatever you felt could have been changed, then what I would say to that is this is not going to be the first show ever. This is not meant to please every Indian American. This was supposed to be just an entertainment TV show. So since I am kind of in that boat, like my advice is like, don't take it so to heart, you know, like if you can't relate to it, if there were things that, you know, maybe perpetuated stereotypes in your head, just understand that at the end of the day, you don't have to depend on entertainment and these big stars to, you know, slash down stereotypes. You have control to do that in your own home, in your own job, in your own community. So if a TV show wasn't able to do that for you, then fine. Like, you know, tomorrow when you go to work or when you live your life, like make sure that you're being that example that you wanted to see on TV. But yeah, overall, I would say I wasn't the biggest fan of the show. My main reasons, just to recap, because I know I was kind of blabbering before, is I thought that the Indian accent was not believable. And then the second thing is I thought that, you know, it did do some perpetuating of some stereotypes, unfortunately, but I do know that there are people that don't think that, so it might just be, you know, people who can identify with the Indian experiences that I grew up with. The third thing, that the characters were written in a very confusing way. For example, if the Indian mom was super, super traditional, I almost feel as if that didn't come across until her random lines that were traditional. Like she seemed like a very modernized Indian mom, which is amazing. Like that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But then it's almost as if like they wanted to make her traditional, and the way that they did that was by random like lines. But even the way that she walked, the way that she dressed, the way that she carried herself, it wasn't as traditional. You know what? I'm not even going to get into that part because that one, again, it didn't bother me. The main thing that bothered me was the accent, the acting, and the stereotypical scenes or whatever. But all of that aside, what I did like about the show is I liked that, you know, we have a show that now is starting all these conversations with Indian Americans. Like, I don't actually know if like non-Indian Americans are talking about the show, but I know Indian Americans are definitely talking about the show. And I love that it's just, you know, so many conversations are being started. So many people have felt empowered. So many people do feel excited and happy. So that makes me super, super happy that it was able to do that for so many people. I think having a TV show that's juggling so many heavy themes as well as so many characters, and again, just a very new concept of a TV show, it was a great first step. I mean, no one was expecting it to be perfect. I think that this was a great, because this was a bold TV show. This was not just like, oh, we're having a TV show about like an Indian American girl and it's gonna be like yada yada yada. Like, no, like it was meant to go in on hard topics. It was meant to show like, you know, uncomfortable like high school situations and experiences. So the fact that they went all in with all of this, it was messy on some parts, but honestly, like they did the thing.
And let's be honest, Indianness is the most complex things in the world.
Identity-wise, experience-wise, personality-wise, family-wise, career-wise, everything about being Indian is so complex, and it's so beautiful. I mean, even within complexity, there's so much beauty. And yeah, I think the show just, again, like it just sparks conversation. It just makes you think about your own experience. It makes you empathize with someone else's experience. And one thing I will say with this show that I really, really want to get out there is, as Indian Americans, we need to stop judging other Indian Americans for their Indianness or their Americanness. Like, if you're going to judge someone, judge them on being a good or bad person, which you shouldn't even be doing that anyway, but, you know, judge them on something that actually like matters, like who they are as a person. But if you're judging someone based off of like, oh, like she's like not American enough because she eats 7 almonds soaked in water every morning. Or if you're like another person who's like, oh my God, like she's so Americanized, like she wears like skirts and goes out and drinks. Like, don't be that person. Let me tell you, sis or bro, the #1 people knocking down Indians in America are Indians ourselves. One thing I will say to wrap this video up is I really wish as a community Indians were more tight-knit. One of the things I love about the Middle Eastern community, the Hispanic community, and the Black community is how close-knit and supportive they are of each other. Like, I wish that Indians could, you know, pick that up and use that as just something that we could do for ourselves. Like if we see an Indian brother or sister, you know, doing their thing, like applaud them. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video. This was super fun to film. I would love if you all dropped comments in the comment section below. At the end of the day, we can all share opinions, we can all share our thoughts, you know, as long as it comes from a place of love, open-mindedness, and not from a place of hate or judgment or, you know, trying to knock someone down. So none of that on this platform. As I mentioned, go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye everyone. So my camera died. Oh, problems of being a YouTuber. I just want to disclaim this video because I think it's super important, not even because of what people will say, but just for myself. In terms of the TV show as a TV show, like a TV show on Netflix, I think it's phenomenal. I am super, super happy that, you know, we have Indian people making moves.